Hi, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development, and we are currently live in the break room. This is going to be an amazing and engaging episode. It is entitled The Science of Motivation: Cultivate Internal Drive for Lasting Success with Brian Hite. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, but I'd also like to thank those who are logged on now. I see we have an audience as well as who are going to be logged on later for continue to support and commit yourselves to being part of this amazing community as we continue to help people to inspire them to build a life that's based around health, happiness, and prosperity. So, let me tell you a bit about our guest. He's a renaissance man, a stuntman, performance expert, challenging assumptions, and elevating success. Those are his basic bywords. Brian Hite is a modern day Renaissance man whose journey from the adrenaline fueled world of stunts to the thoughtful realms of philosophy and psychology gives him a unique perspective on performance and motivation. With over 100 film and TV credits, including a Screen Actors Guild Award for 24, Brian has been hit by cars, set on fire, and jumped off buildings, all while mastering the art of performing under pressure. But what sets him apart isn't just his physical feats, it's how he's blended these experiences with a deep understanding of the mind and human behavior. That's enough of an introduction for me. The rest we're going to hear from our guest as we welcome him live in the breakout room, Brian Hite. Welcome, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for spending the time with us, the next 40 minutes or so. And we appreciate you as well. So, you have a very colored career in terms of the stunt aspects, all the stuff that you have gone through that we see in the movies, and we think, wow, it looks good, it looks terrific. But behind the scenes, you have had the experience of what it took putting your body on the line and going through all the various techniques of the rolls and the stunts and the fire, you name it, the full works. Is that one of the best part of your legacy? Or is it now that you are into like maybe your twilight days and you look back, it's just a part that sets the foundation for the legacy that you're building now from psychology and the other aspect of it?
You know, I'd have to say the answers are yes and no to that.
Ah,
I would like to think that the best days are yet to come, that they're in the future.
ah,
I don't know. Maybe
yeah.
they're already past. Who knows? But I'd like to think that there are some good ones to come still. And yes, stunts absolutely has been the foundation from which a lot of things have launched. It really I don't know when people ask me about the journey of I'm 50 at this point, the journey of the half century that I've spent on this planet, it they seem to divide themselves like the journey itself seems to divide itself up into a few different phases almost by decade, really. I mean, starting at around 20 is when I found, in fact, at 20 is when I got my very first stunt job at a live stunt show at a Six Flags in New Jersey in the US. And then around 30 is when I believe that was the first time that I took a job working with the US Army as a sport performance psychologist. And
Mhm.
then went back to stunts again for another few years and then went back to the Army again. And I was with the Army for probably about 10, well, it was 9 years or around that point. I wasn't in the Army. I was working as a contractor for the Army as a sport performance psychologist, which we can get into
Okay.
more later if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I ended up quitting that job a few years ago. It was about 2.5 years ago, and opening my own business and going back to stunts again for the third time for those counting. Um, And trying to really put together all of those things. In other words, for most of my adult life, I it was like I was living two separate lives. It was like I was a stuntman sometimes and a sport performance psychologist at other times. And now I'm trying to just be one person who is taking all of those experiences and melding it into one thing. That's Brian Hite Global. And through that, I'm doing keynote speaking, I'm doing individual coaching. I will start developing some classes pretty soon. I also do stunts. I'm on my second book. My first book, Begin Again, Utilize the Wisdom of Eastern and Western Ideologies, was published a couple years ago. I'm about halfway through Stuntman's Guide to Motivation right now, so that'll be coming out. So I've just tried to take all of those different experiences and make it into just one thing rather than trying to live on two separate trajectories.
All right, great. Thank you for sharing, Brian. We appreciate that and we appreciate you. I would like to use two adjective terms to describe what you just said because some of my friends tell me the same thing about me. Of course, I haven't gone through the stuff that you have been through. You are what I would describe as multi talented, multifaceted. So here's the question, Brian. When it comes to doing the stunts that you have done and the awards that you have received and stuff, what is the level of motivation that is required for you to rise to the occasion, forget all the danger and all the risk, put that aside, and just focus on getting the job done? What does it take out of you?
Hmm. Well, honestly, I believe that motivation is more of it's one of those things that just needs to it waxes and wanes, it goes up and down. The sources of motivation vary, and we'll get into all of that what I'm talking about in a little bit. But that is a theme that runs throughout the 30-year career that I've had. When I think about the actual stunts themselves, it's less about motivation and more about how do I make sure that I am completely ready to be able to
Mm,
perform to my potential in that moment? And that's another. So the three programs that I offer right now that I'm focusing on are motivation, pressure, and a four-phased approach to performance. Any performance, literally any performance, can be broken down into these four phases, and the way that we analyze it and work through it can help people make sure that they are ready for whatever that performance is. And that's really what I think, the heart of your question gets to is, if I'm hired to get hit by a car, how do I make sure that I show up for that job ready and that I prepare on the day while I'm on set in the most effective way? And that when that car is driving at me, they've called action and the car's headed toward me and it's getting ready to happen. How do I make sure that I keep my mind where it needs to be and that my body is in a state that allows me to perform that stunt in a way that allows me to go home in the same condition that I showed up in, which is always the goal?
yeah. All right, great. Thank you for clearing that up. Which leads me to ask this question. In terms of the transition that you have made into sports psychology, how much of what you had been doing with regards to that mindset you just spoke about, in terms of being prepared and ready to face the stunt expositions, how is the transition helpful to you in terms of being now involved in sports psychology and taking that same mindset and helping people with challenges, not necessarily in terms of doing a stunt, but facing similar challenges in their daily lives?
Yeah, it's interesting. It works both ways, this directionality, because well, let me just tell you, I'll just start a little bit earlier on in my life. I never, when I graduated from high school, I went to college because that's what I was supposed to do. And when I was in
Okay.
college, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. I thought that I would figure it out in college, and it turns out I did, but not at college. And as a result of any of the classes that I took, it was just the result of going to see this live show. It was I believe it was the beginning of my junior year, maybe the summer after my senior or sophomore year. But I saw this show and I was blown away, literally blown away, just by what it was that I saw. from the moment the explosion happened on stage and the stage piece opened and motorcycles came jumping out, I was like, yes, that right there, that's a job that I can do and be passionate about and get up every day and be motivated to do. And so I ended up figuring out how to get the job, which was learn how to ride a motorcycle well enough to be in the show, learn how to do fights, and learn how to do high falls, to fall from high places. Those were the three main skills. I learned them, I practiced them, I went to the audition, and I got the job. And I did that job the summer after my junior year and I was hooked, and I couldn't focus on college. I just couldn't. I couldn't focus on the classes, and I was in a position to basically fail everything. So I
Wow.
dropped all of my courses. I dropped out of college with one semester to go. I did the show one more semester there in New Jersey and then moved to Los Angeles to do stunts. And that was what I expected to do for the rest of my life. I was a stuntman. And that went for maybe 4 years or so before I realized, you know what? I miss learning. I'm a curious
Mm.
person by nature, and I miss learning. Stunts is it's a very challenging field in a lot of ways. It's a very rewarding field in a lot of ways, but not intellectually. It's
Okay.
very physically challenging and very physically rewarding, but it's not intellectually rewarding. So I decided to go back and get my bachelor's degree, which I did. And I continued on with a master's degree in sports psychology and a PhD in organizational psychology. But never with the intention of working in those fields. Again, in my mind, I was going to be a stuntman for the rest of my life. That's what I was going to do. This was just extracurricular activities that I enjoyed. Well,
Yeah.
life takes turns and twists and what have you. And next thing you know, I find myself working as a sport and performance psychologist for the Army. And that was unexpected but fun. It was a good journey. And one of the things, to get back to the point of your question, is as I started learning that material through my master's program and then again into the doctoral program, it was immediately apparent how useful those concepts, techniques, and skills were that I was learning as in my academic programs, how applicable they were in the stunt world. I was immediately able to apply these things that I was learning in school in a meaningful way that really improved my work as a stuntman in a lot of ways, on and off set. We're here to talk about motivation. One of those things was in the realm of motivation. I learned about motivation, and so I could more intentionally cultivate my motivation during those times when it was low, or I was maybe leaning on the wrong sources of motivation. So absolutely, the academic material that I learned was helpful in stunts. But then my experience as a stuntman has also been very beneficial for me as a sport and performance
Was
psychologist,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
particularly with the military. And here's where the biggest connection lay. I was standing in the front of a classroom in front of a bunch of soldiers who had no idea who I was. Again, I wasn't in the military. I'm just in civilian clothing. And so here I am, a civilian, and I'm going to talk to them about how to perform better as soldiers. Never been a soldier, never done any soldier tasks, but that's my job, is to do that. And so you can imagine the types of looks and attitudes that I got. Like, all right, civilian guy, what you got? How are you going to help us? Go
Mhm.
ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but one of the things that really connected and at least gave me, maybe 5 extra minutes of open mindedness on their part to convince them that maybe I had something useful to say, was the fact that, like them, or at least like many of them, I also have been in situations where if you do not perform well, bad things happen to you or others
Mm.
around
Yeah.
you. I've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
I've watched the bad things happen when mistakes occur. So that was something we were able to connect around, and from there, so and from an experiential standpoint, I understand what it's like to need to perform very well in situations where the consequences truly do matter. So from that, on that level, that has really allowed me to connect with the clients that I have, on a level that I don't think would have been possible had I not had the experiences in stunts that I
Mhm.
did.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Thank you for sharing, Brian. We have an audience and there's a comment. It's just a greeting. Good evening to you all. Good afternoon to you, Gracie Vincent. Thank you so much. One of our very special supporters. She's almost on all our podcasts. So she's just saying hi and good evening to our guest as well, Brian. Thank you for your continued commitment and support, Gracie. So we are in the presence of Brian Hite. The episode is entitled The Science of Motivation: Cultivate Internal Drive for Lasting Success with Brian Hite. You can make your comments, you can ask your questions in the chat. I will show them and I will ask Brian to comment as well or respond if it becomes necessary. So let me put him on the spot here a bit as I bring
Easy
up
to get
this
wrapped
on
up in our
screen.
own stuff. And the fact of the matter is that any situation we're in can be viewed in many, many different ways. You can go top down, meaning change how you're thinking, and that will influence your body. Or you can change what's going on in your body, and that's going to influence your mind and how it is that you're thinking there too. If that's the perception that we have, man, it does. It's a game changer.
That's what flow is, right?
Three things happen, and they need to happen in this order for us to move ourselves in a little bit better direction. Number one is
Okay, there you go. There you go. So, Brian, tell us a bit about the philosophy of what we just saw there. And let me get the screen right. How does it apply to the work that you do? And what is the message we should get out of it as a result?
Hmm. Well, there were two different things that came up in that clip right there, but uh-oh,
Oh, stand by, stand
we
by.
got a commercial happening.
All right. Sorry about that.
There we go. No, it's there were a couple different things that came up in there. Neither,
Uh-huh.
ironically enough, related to motivation, but both very interesting. And so I'll start with the last thing where I said that there were three things. I'll go ahead and finish finish that thought because it's really important and it does apply to everything. Those three
Okay.
things are awareness, acceptance, and action. So what I
Okay.
mean by that is, in order to move forward, we have to have self-awareness. We can't change something that we don't know needs to be changed. That can't happen. So we have to develop awareness of ourselves, and not just awareness of our behaviors, but awareness and not even awareness of specific thoughts necessarily, but awareness of thought patterns, awareness of emotional patterns, of reactive patterns, of ways that we tend to react in certain situations or when we're around certain people. So just self-awareness, physically, what's going on in our bodies, mentally, what's happening in our minds, emotionally, what's happening there, and socially, how do we tend to interact with others? These are things that we have to develop a very good awareness around. And once we do develop that awareness, then acceptance is required. And this is where I lose some people if they just turn it off. Acceptance, what? I don't want it. So I'm just gonna get. No, it's not about. I'm not telling you that you have to live with it, that you have to accept it and just keep it that way. I'm saying that we have to accept reality as it is, as opposed to glossing things over, turning camels into unicorns kind of a thing, or ignoring things completely. That's not helpful. We have to like it or don't like it. Reality is what it is. And so once we're aware of what it is, we just need to accept that. Because
Okay.
from that place of acceptance, we can then take effective action. If we haven't accepted reality as it is, then if we take action trying to change stuff, we might be changing the wrong things in the
Mm,
wrong ways. So
yeah.
we're not as effective as we could be. So those are the three things. We need to develop awareness and then accept what is so that we can then take the most effective actions possible to move ourselves in the direction that we want to go. And
Wow.
and then now to back up to the very first part of what I was talking about in that little clip, the types of actions we can take can be top down or bottom up. And what I mean by that is that top down is let me pay attention to what's happening in my mind and how my thought process is and how I'm perceiving the world around me. Because if I can develop a way of directing my attention to the most effective things, if I can perceive the world in ways that are helpful and productive, then that will adjust my body. And people, this isn't new to anybody. I mean, anybody who has, if you just take a second right now and you just closed your eyes and you think about the person in your life who means the most to you, just picture them very vividly and clearly in your mind. there are changes that happen in your body. You might feel them, but if you were hooked up to physiological measures, your muscle tension would have gone down. You would have relaxed your muscles a little bit. If your shoulders were up here, then they would have dropped down here.
Right. Yeah.
Breathing probably became deeper and calmer. Blood pressure dropped a little bit. These are just heart rate probably slowed. The physiological changes that came from just simply putting your attention in one place are very real. Now, it works the other way too. So if I exercise, for example, if I have vigorous exercise, a lot of cardio, there's a lot of research around this too. If I'm doing cardiovascular research, really pushing my heart rate for a period of time, that changes the neurochemicals in my brain. It
Hmm.
changes my physiology, and I will feel calmer. I will be
Yeah.
more patient. I will be able to regulate and manage my emotions more effectively. I feel
Right.
different,
Right.
so,
Yeah.
and I will think differently.
Yeah.
So this idea of top down versus bottom up, I can affect change either way. And the way that I talk about this with clients is to break down us as human beings into the four categories I alluded to earlier: physical, mental, emotional, and social. And if we can target each of those areas and think about them specifically, then we can better tune ourselves in any performance moment to help ensure that we're where we need to be in order to be at our best. So, physically, am I stretched out? Have I eaten? Did I get enough sleep? Mentally, what kinds of thoughts am I thinking? Where is my attention focused? Emotionally, what emotions am I experiencing, and are they productive ones? Do I need to manage the levels of them? And then socially, how am I communicating with other people? Most performance situations, I don't know about all, but most involve at least some communication with somebody else. So,
Hmm.
what's our relationship with those people, and is our communication effective? So
Yeah.
that's kind of a little breakdown of that clip that you showed.
Wow. It's deep and I love it, Brian. Thank you so much for taking us on that journey. I really appreciate the value of the content. So there are three A's there. That is acceptance, awareness, and action. And
Yeah,
it's like a
awareness
sequence.
first. Awareness
Awareness
first, because
first,
we have to be aware. Otherwise,
then
we can't accept,
acceptance,
and we certainly can't change. So,
and
yeah,
then
awareness and
okay,
then acceptance and
right,
then action. Yeah.
action. Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. So now, I see our audience has increased, guys. We'd love to hear your questions and your comments from Brian. As you can see or hear, a combination of both. This guy is full of solid, valid information with regards to the mindset and the science of motivation and how to cultivate that internal drive for lasting success. Before I get into his publications, just one more question that's in the back of my mind. And how do we manage our thoughts and our beliefs and our emotions so that they help us to have a more impactful performance, whether it's from a leadership position or a team position, or maybe just how we approach normal everyday life?
Hmm. Yeah, well, the specifics of that would depend on the situation, but there are some general principles that tend to work well, and they come up when I talk about pressure. Actually, it come up. Some of those come up when I talk about pressure because some people think about pressure like I hear this all the time. You got to learn how to perform under pressure. You got to
Uh huh.
have be able to deal with pressure situations and do well in
Yeah.
pressure situations. And the more that I've been in a lot of situations that people would define as pressure situations, but the more I think about it, I don't believe that such a thing even exists. Because to
Hmm.
say that one needs to perform well in a performance situation or a pressure
Pressure.
situation
Yeah.
assumes that situations by definition will create pressure. And I don't believe that's true. We create pressure. Us, the way that
Hmm.
we think, the way that we perceive.
Yeah.
Pressure
Yeah.
exists in the mind, not in the moment. It exists because we create it. And what I mean by that is if we're in a circumstance where we are focused on the bad things that might happen if we don't do well, that's where pressure thrives. That's when pressure comes to really grab a hold of us in a very strong way. is when we're focused on those outcomes. Well, if I do bad, they're going to fire me, or people are going to think badly about me, or I'm going to lose my money, or whatever. I might get hurt, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But that's where
Yeah.
my focus goes. That's where pressure lives. And we can reduce that pressure if we switch our focus from what bad might happen to what
To
good
what
might
good.
happen. So
Mm.
now, what are the possible good I'm sure there has to be a reason why we're doing what we're doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that there has to be some sort of benefit that we see at the end of it. Now, sometimes, again, our fixation is on the benefit, if you want to call it that, is the avoidance of something bad. So when you ask about certain ways of thinking, one is we can think about avoiding something bad, or we can think about approaching going toward
Something.
something good. And
Something
that's
good.
what I mean by switching from the thoughts about the threat, what bad might happen, to what good might happen. So if I do well in this situation, what's the good? Well, people are gonna, my reputation is gonna go up. Maybe I'll be able to get a promotion at my job, or I'll have access to more resources, whatever it might be. That's the good thing. That's where my focus can go. But notice at the beginning, I said reduce the pressure, doesn't eliminate pressure. And the reason for
Mm.
that is because my focus is still on the outcome. It's on the
Yeah.
future. In the future is where pressure lives, not in the present. So in order to eliminate pressure, I put my focus in the present moment. I put my focus now. What are the things that I need to do in this moment, right now, in order to set conditions for success? What can I do? What steps can I take? Again, physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially, that create a climate, an environment that makes it more likely that I will be able to be successful in this situation. The example that I often use, just because it's it's ubiquitous, it's around the world, people are familiar with it, is soccer or football, depending on
Mhm.
what part of the planet you are in when you're
Yeah.
listening to this. But the reason I say that is because if I ask a client, okay, so we're playing soccer, we're playing football. What do you want to do? What's the goal? What's the objective? I want to win the game. Great. It's a wonderful objective. So how do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, we need to score more goals than the other team. Great. Yes, you're absolutely correct. So how do you do that? Well, we need to dribble well, and we need to pass well, and we need to play aggressive defense. And when we make mistakes, we need to come back from those mistakes quickly so that we can get back in the game. Yes, that's what we need to do. Those are the things that in this moment, if you put your attention on them, will maximize the likelihood of you scoring more goals than the other team, which will allow you to win the game. But if you put your focus on winning the game, or even on trying to score more goals, that does nothing, because it doesn't tell you how to do it. It takes me back to one of the experiences I had when I was working with Army soldiers. They were training at the National Training Center. They were about to deploy. So this is like for those it's the World Cup or the Super Bowl of training events at the National Training Center. And they were practicing clearing buildings. There were 4 buildings to clear. And they went through clearing these buildings, this unit. And I was right along with them. I was traveling with them as they were clearing these buildings. I saw exactly what was happening. I was listening to every word that they said. And they were bad. I mean, bad. And when they came out, the observer controller, basically the coach or the referee or the evaluator, said the same things. You guys were bad, and here's why. What you need to do is you need to slow down. You need to take a tactical pause before you go in the room. You got to calm down and take a tactical pause before you go in the room. And he was
Yeah.
absolutely 100% right. So he told him what to do, but he didn't tell him how to do it. So
Mm.
yes, the goal is to calm down. Great. How do I do it? The goal is to take this tactical. All right. Well, what am I supposed to do during the tactical pause? It's going to allow me to benefit. And so what I told them was, okay, so this is what he said. He said, calm down and take a tactical pause. Well, how do you calm down? Remember that breathing class? We did a class on breathing. We did a class of how you can actually take control of your breath and your muscle tension. And you can do that in a very quick way. And he said to take a tactical pause. That's wonderful advice too. But what are you going to do during it? Remember that class that we talked, that discussion we had around cue words, about words and thoughts that you can put into your mind that direct your attention to where it needs to be at a given moment? And so what they came up with as a way to put all of that into practice was they would stack on the door and they'd say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's a cue word. It directs their attention to where it needs to be. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Ready? And then they'd take one breath, they'd let it out, getting their physiology where it needed to be, and then they'd execute. And then they would clear the room and then they would stack on the next door, do the exact same thing. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Ready? Go. And that's what they would do. And so that's the whole point with pressure is if we keep our focus on the present moment, on those things right now at this time that we can do, pressure goes away and our performance is maximized. No, I lost you. I don't see you. I don't see you and I don't hear you. Is it just me? Maybe. If so, I'm going to go ahead and just keep talking about pressure because here's something that's the pushback that I get with pressure is okay, but I need pressure. Like I need pressure to perform well. It's what pushes me forward. If I don't feel pressure, then I don't do well. And my answer to that is I don't think it's pressure you're talking about. I think it's an energy activation level that you're talking about. And you're absolutely right if that's what you mean, because there is an ideal amount of amped upness, of energy activation that we need in order to perform well in any given situation. And if we don't have it, we don't do well. If our energy activation levels are too low, then we tend to physically just feel very dragging and slow and sluggish. Mentally, kind of the same thing. Our minds just don't work very well. And we can't process information very well. And we just can't retrieve information if somebody's asking us a question. Emotionally, we can't regulate very well. Patience levels might be low. We may be very volatile and react very quickly to things. That's if our energy activation levels are too low. If our energy activation levels are too high, we have problems too, though. Physically, we might feel very agitated and very tense. Mentally, our minds may be racing. We can't land on anything in terms of attentional focus. We can't put our attention where it needs to be. And then emotionally, we tend to feel a lot of anxiety and nervousness. Again, a lot of jitteriness that happens inside us emotionally. And all of those things affect how we will interact with others socially. But when we are just right, when we have that ideal amount of energy activation, physically we're calm, not relaxed, but we're calm. We're in a place where we can use our bodies in the most effective way. Mentally, we're open and we can process information very efficiently and really retrieve the information when we need it. And emotionally, we're engaged. We're again calm. We're happy. We're happy. We're leaning into what's happening. So emotionally, we're where we need to be. And then socially, again, we can read other people and we can react accordingly. So that's my answer when people say, "No, Brian, I have to have pressure. I need pressure. I do great under pressure. I need to do well under pressure." That sounds more like energy activation to me. Now, in terms of motivation, if we're talking about motivation, the question that I get most of the time is, okay, so how do I get my people? These are leaders that talk to me. How do I get my people to do what they're supposed to do without me poking them, without me prodding them in any kind of way? Like, how do I get them to just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do? That's what I get most often. And my answer to that is there are a couple different things we need to consider. One is the fact are we talking about levels of motivation or are we talking about sources of motivation? And it sounds like from that question you mean levels of motivation. So let's start there. But it turns out that sources of motivation, in other words, the reason why we are motivated, is also very, very important. So let's start with levels of motivation. There are three things that tend to affect whether somebody is a little bit motivated or a lot motivated. And those are number one, the extent to which we believe we're capable of being successful. If we don't believe we can be successful, then we're not going to be motivated to do something. Nobody likes to go into a situation and fail, like no fall on their face. We don't like to do that. So if we don't believe that we're capable of doing something well, we're probably not going to be motivated to do it. Number two is the extent to which we care about whatever it is we're talking about. Does it matter to us for some reason? And again, this gets to the sources of motivation. There are many reasons why something might matter to us, and those reasons are important. I'll get there in a second, but we have to care about something for some reason. And the third thing that affects levels of motivation, whether we're really motivated or not very motivated at all, is the cost benefit analysis. Does the benefit of engaging in this behavior outweigh the cost of engaging in this behavior? And that one really matters because I can believe that I can be successful and I can even care about whatever it is. But if I don't believe that the benefit is going to outweigh the cost, then I'm not going to be motivated to do it. So that cost benefit's important. So those are the three things that really affect levels of motivation. One, the extent to which we can be that we believe, and this is important, I'll come back to in a second, the extent to which we believe we can be successful, the extent to which we believe that there's value or importance to what it is that we're doing, and the extent to which we believe that benefits outweigh costs. And I emphasize that word believe because all three of those things happen in our own minds. We determine whether we are likely to be successful and whether we care about it and whether the benefits outweigh the costs. It doesn't matter whether you think I can be successful or whether you think it's important or whether you believe the benefits outweigh the cost. It only matters whether I do. So those are the three things that really that affect levels of motivation. So I'll pause there to see if you have any questions on that before we get into the sources of motivation.
Wow, I was out of it there, Brian, for a moment because I had a power outage. I realized that you kept the audience connected and they didn't go anywhere. I'm seeing the same amount of people there. That's amazing. Thank you guys so much. And I kind of lost things there for a while, but the power came back. So I just had to get back in. And I guess you've been really faithful and understanding of the technology here and how it works. So you kept the thing alive. I want to get into the publications from you, but I have lost
Yeah, before
the.
we do that, let me just wrap
Yeah,
up the
sure,
sources of motivation because that's really
sure. Go
important
ahead.
and it fits within the values. And do you care about it or don't you? Because like I said, we can care about things for a lot of reasons, but there are several different ways to think about it, and it really does matter. So one reason why we might care is because we're going to get a reward or avoid a punishment of some kind. I can be very, very motivated to get something or to avoid something. But there are a lot of problems with that source of motivation because we can't always depend on that reward or punishment being present, especially if we think about this from a leadership standpoint. I can't, as a leader, offer somebody rewards for every single little thing that they do or threaten punishment because, number one, as a for punishment, I can't follow people around all day, and that's necessary in order for punishment to be effective. And
Yeah.
rewards, it's just the situation. The reason it doesn't it's hard to sustain over time. It's hard to sustain motivation over time using rewards because if the only reason I'm doing something is to get a reward, then I
Mm,
truly don't care about the behavior. And as soon as the reward goes away, the behavior goes away too. So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really I can be very motivated by rewards, but if we're talking about sustained motivation over time, rewards and punishment just aren't very useful. The next is shame and guilt and ego. So I can be very motivated to avoid feeling ashamed of myself, to avoid feeling guilty, or to avoid being looked at badly in your eyes, at least from my perspective. If I think that you're going to look down on me or think badly about me, I might be very motivated to engage in a certain behavior. But the problem again is that I don't care about the behavior. The only thing I care about is not feeling guilty, not feeling ashamed, or not being looked down
Hmm.
on. And
Yeah.
and so again, the motivation tends to be very hard to sustain over time. And now you have the added addition of just being very stressed and anxious about just experiencing very uncomfortable emotions. The next thing, in terms of sources of motivation, tends to be better. And this is where I can recognize the value of what I'm doing because it aligns with my own values, with my own core beliefs, those things that really speak to me at my heart. Now, if I can connect the behaviors with my values, with my beliefs, now we've got some motivation that can be sustained over time. Again, I might not like the behavior. It might not be something that I'm looking forward to. For example, I was up at 5 a.m. this morning to work out. I did not want to work out. It wasn't fun for me. I didn't enjoy it, but it's part of who I am. I'm an athlete. I'm a stunt person. So, of course, I work out. That's what I do. Or writing, I get the same way. Sometimes I don't feel like sitting down and writing, and it's not fun, but I'm a writer. That's what I do. So, of course, I'm going to sit down and write because that action is aligned with how I see myself and the values that I hold. And then the
Okay.
last source of motivation is the best one. It's just fun. We just enjoy it. Like, why are you doing it? Because it's fun. Why not? Like, there's just no other
All right.
consequence associated with it. Just fun. So those are the sources of motivation. And obviously, if we can move those sources of motivation more often toward those internal sources where we align the behavior with our values or because we enjoy it, we're going to be way better off, particularly if we're talking about motivation over time, than we would be if we lean on those rewards and punishment or the shame, guilt, and ego.
Aye. Whoa, that's a clinic there, Brian. But we have an audience, and I'm sure that they appreciate it. And those who would look on later at this stream, this particular episode, and we are quickly moving on. But I just want to get into this publication here. Let me see if I could change the dynamics of the screen. Yeah, there we go. Begin again. Tell us a bit about this. I know you would have mentioned it earlier, but I want people to know what's the concept and the value that you want them to get, the impact you want this publication to make on their lives as a whole.
Yeah, this book was interesting because I didn't sit down. I didn't sit down to write it. I didn't intentionally create this book. It emerged from work I was doing on myself at a
Okay.
challenging point in my life. And part of
Right.
that work was every morning I would get up and I would read little bits from 5 or 6 different books, wisdom books like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations or Seneca's works or the Bhagavad Gita or the Tao Te Ching. Like there were lots of different books that really had wisdom in them, and I would read a little bit from them. And whenever whatever concept I happened to be reading about struck a chord with me, I would write that down and why it struck a chord with me on a little sticky note. And then those sticky notes, I still have those sticky notes. I have a whole bag load of them right here. Those sticky notes, each of them turned into one of the essays that is in that book. So as I started to write and I wrote the essays, which take the form of here's a problem that lots of us end up having, and here's some information about it. And here are some things that if you do them, you're probably going to see some benefit from it. That's the form of all the essays. And after doing that, I don't know, 50 or 60 times, I realized, I have a lot of these and I probably could turn this into a book. And so at that point, it did become intentional. But the book itself didn't emerge from my intention to write it. It just kind of came out of, like I just said, the work that I was doing on my own. And the only thing that I'd love for people to get out of this book is to just connect with some of the challenges I was facing or some of the insights that I had. It really is a window into my thought process and the way that I was experiencing the world around me at that particular time. And it incorporates Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy, the science and academic research that I stay in touch with as well. It was interesting to me how much those things came together, how frequently things written 2,500 years ago
Yeah.
were almost identical to the types of conclusions that researchers were coming up with research studies today. So that's that book.
Wow. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly try and get the next one up, and it's even more intriguing because I'm seeing the gentleman here, Mr. Les Brown. Um, he wrote the forward for you. What's the connection there, Brian? And how
Yeah, the
deep
change. This is a book that I didn't write the whole thing. I contributed a
yeah,
chapter. It's a chapter on
yeah.
resilience. And actually, if you were interested in the awareness, acceptance, and action part of what we were talking about at the beginning, the chapter that I wrote expands on that So there's
Okay.
way more information about that process in this book. That's what the chapter is, and I
Okay.
use a story from the stunt world. It was a motorcycle stunt that I was doing on Hawaii 50 that I messed up. We were rehearsing. It was the final rehearsal before we were going to do it, and I wrecked the motorcycle when I was not. I was actually, it was the stunt was to wreck the motorcycle, but I wrecked the motorcycle when I was not supposed to wreck it. I
Okay.
broke the motorcycle, and they ended up having to postpone the stunt till the next day because they had to go
Wow.
buy a new motorcycle and then paint
Yeah.
it to look
Yeah.
like the first motorcycle because they'd already shot. It was a whole big thing. So I used that story to talk about resilience and how to come back from, really, I mean, talk about situations that most people define as pressure situations, coming back into that situation where they'd spent thousands and thousands of dollars. And we came back on a Saturday too, by the way. They weren't even supposed to be shooting that day. I cost that production hundreds of thousands of dollars probably.
Wow. Wow.
And, and so, but there I was on the motorcycle. It was just me. They all came back for that one stunt. So I use that story to talk about resilience and really how to look at that through the lens of that awareness, acceptance, and action.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. So we come into the end of the program, and I'm gonna put up some stuff there for Brian. I'd like him to tell us how we can make contact with him if we need to reach him for his expertise, and also how they can get copies of your publications.
Yeah, well, you can absolutely go to Brian Hite Global, www.brianhite, BRIANHITE Global. And that's my website. It's going through some pretty major changes. So if you go there today, it's going to look one way. If you go there a week or two from now, it's going to look completely different. But that's one place you can go. And up on the screen too is my Facebook page. You can connect with me there. LinkedIn, you can connect with me there. Instagram, I'm at Brian, BRIAN underscore HITE 23. I'm there as well. And yeah, and I'll tell you what, because the website's kind of going through some changes and I'm not able to offer free stuff the way that I usually am, I'll just tell you about it. If you just send me an email at Brian at brianhiteglobal.com, the email address is Brian at brianhiteglobal.com. Just send me an email and just say that you heard me on this podcast, and I'll give you a couple things. I'll give you free digital copies of both Begin Again and The Change, and I'll give you 50% off whichever program you decide you want to buy. Again, there are three. One that's a 5-week program on pressure, and then 6-week programs on motivation and the 4-phased approach to performance that I mentioned earlier. So just for listening, if you're interested, there's some gifts that you can have. And all you got to do is just send me an email. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Brian. We appreciate that. We appreciate you. So there you have it, folks. And I will put that in the show notes as well, so that who's coming on to see this later on when it's on the World Wide Web on the different platforms, and we are on about 10 different platforms. They're gonna get the opportunity to send you that email and take advantage of the stuff that you're offering. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh,
But
you're
there
very
you have it,
welcome.
folks. Yeah, you're welcome. Brian Hite, the Renaissance man in the house, and he has been sharing so much valuable content with regards to his experience as a stuntman, his transition from that into sports psychology and other areas in which he has been a professional helping people. A man who's been doing keynote speaking as well, and his publications, you can get them on Amazon, as well as please visit his website and do take advantage of sending him that email. As I said before, I will do that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience, kind of quiet in the background there. That's all right. I do apologize for the power going out for a couple of minutes or so, but that's how it works sometimes. Technology, things you don't have no control over. It's just life. And as Brian would say, see all the good things that could happen and focus on that as an outcome instead of the other way around. We appreciate that so much. Until next time, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development live in the breakout room with our guest, Brian Hite, saying so long, guys. Godspeed, God bless, shalom, namaste. And remember, please keep these watchwords in mind: health, happiness, and prosperity. Bye for now, guys.